Ladies and gentlemen, folks, I would like to thank and welcome each of you to joining us for our holiday Grieving Hearts. At this time, I am going to introduce Christine McMillan, certainly a well-trusted bereaved counselor throughout Windsor and Essex County.
Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Now? Try now?
Folks, I'd like to welcome each of you and thank you for joining us for our holiday Grieving Hearts. At this time, I'd like to introduce Christine McMillan, a grief counselor well respected within the Windsor and Essex County community.
Thank you. And to the Families First team for continuing to provide such a valuable service to the grieving in Windsor and Essex County. Thank you to all of you for coming out tonight on this dreary night. Thank you for those of you who are joining us via live stream. This is a difficult time, right?
Absolutely.
Holidays are approaching, and I'm sure you'd rather be anywhere else but here tonight. But I do appreciate you making the effort to come out here and join Grieving Hearts in the holiday presentation. So, as I said, the holidays are fast approaching, and it's usually a special time of year. It's a time of year where we gather with family and friends, people that give our life meaning, provide the structure and the foundation of our lives. It's a joyous time. But it's not a joyous time if you're acutely grieving. It's a time that will magnify the absence of your loved one. I do appreciate that. And there's a lot of expectations for you as a griever at this time. And most grieving people, what they do is they tell themselves a story. This is going to be a horrible time. I'm not going to be able to handle it. I'm not going to be able to get through it. And I'm sure that person who's given themselves that, told themselves that narrative, would hope that the holidays don't come, or that we could ignore it, or bypass it altogether. But good mental health is not merely the absence of a diagnosable illness. It's facing crises and disappointments. It's coming to terms with what life has brought us and learning to adjust. So, if you're willing to consider another narrative, then you can stay here tonight, okay? What we're going to talk about tonight is creating a space for your grief, aka pain. Now, it might seem really counterintuitive to want to feel your pain. Why would I want to feel pain? I wish the holidays wouldn't come. I wish I didn't have to face it without my loved one. But the pain that you're experiencing is what Alan Wolfelt calls clean pain. It's pain that comes with being loved and loving. It's honest, it's authentic pain. When you put your grief aside, when you repress it, when you ignore it, that pain that's created is dirty pain. And then you require grief therapy. So people who come to me soon after a death, I really provide them with grief counseling, some guidance. I normalize the grief process because we don't do very well in this society with grief. So, if you're willing to stay with me tonight, I'm going to talk about how to create a space for your grief while still being present for this season. And the door to that alternative narrative is gratitude. You can't be happy and sad at the same time, but you can be sad and you can be grateful. Okay? I want you to think about that. You can be sad, you can hold your sadness, but if you can still say I'm grateful, then you just increase your chances of getting through this process. So we're going to be here for about a little over an hour, hour and a half. We've got a large audience today. I'm grateful for that. Certainly ask me any questions, but as you can tell, this is not a support group format because we never have more than 8 to 10 in a support group because we want to give everyone a chance to chat. So there are support groups in the community. However, this is more about me sharing information about what's normal in grief and some tips on how to get through the holidays. If you have any questions about the contents, if you want me to clarify anything, please feel free to put up your hand and ask. I will stop every so often to ask if you have any questions as well. Okay? I'll ask you halfway through if you want to take a break, a stretch break, a washroom break. The washrooms are out the rear doors there, both men and women. And feel free if you need to. At any point in time, if you need to get up and stretch your legs, you need to get a breath of fresh air, I'm not going to be offended. Okay? So, before we start, we want to just kind of get into the right frame of mind. But we're going to turn off our cell phones. We're going to put it on mute, okay? And we're just going to take some deep breaths, okay? We're going to take some deep breaths in and out. And with every breath you release, I want you to feel the stress and tension leaving your body as best as you can. And I want you to be okay with whatever you're feeling right now and throughout the evening. Okay? I don't accept any apologies for tears. And those of you in the audience who are my clients, right? I don't accept apologies for tears. So let's get started. Did you know you're bereaved? I know you know you're grieving. You're grieving because you're bereaved. Bereaved refers specifically to a separation as a result of death. Bereaved means to be torn apart, to feel robbed. Right? I hear that a lot. I feel robbed. And to have special needs. So when you're bereaved, you've got special needs. And I want you to think about that as we go through the presentation. You have special needs as somebody who's bereaved. And bereavement is widely recognized as one of life's most difficult and stressful experiences. And yet we don't honor it in our society. So you were bereaved. You were grieving. You are a griever, but you're bereaved. Because you were separated from someone you love because of death. Sadness and grief deplete us of our inner resources. Physically, we are exhausted. Mentally, we are distracted. And emotionally, we live on the edge, fearing a loss of composure when we are with friends and family. That's an adequate description, right? But it's more than that. It's more than that. We're going to talk about that tonight. So no wonder, if you just experienced this, that you're dreading the upcoming holiday season. And because we live in a very retail-oriented, capitalistic society, as soon as the black and orange colors are put away, guess what? We see red and green, right? So no wonder you're dreading it. Grief is also very unpredictable, it's very disruptive, and it can be overwhelming. It's these things because it's trying to get your attention. It's trying to get you to pay attention so you process it, so you deal with it, and you don't carry it with you. Because I will guarantee you that you'll never be able to outrun it. And it gets bigger as time goes by. Grief is also normal and natural. It's a normal process once we've been separated from somebody that we love. Make sense? We're here because of attachment. Because you took the risk and attached to this person. John Bowlby, a British psychiatrist, I believe, medical doctor and a psychologist. He's known as the father of attachment. He observed infants and their caregivers. And what he saw when infants were separated from their caregivers, they had a normal instinctual response. They grieved, they protested. And that's an innate biological instinct. Because infants need to be attached to a caregiver in order to survive. Now, as adults, we don't necessarily need another person to survive. But it's not about that. It's about the feeling that comes from being unattached to that one person. It's a feeling of not feeling safe. It's not that the world isn't safe. You feel unsafe. So it's a very primitive and biological instinct, this grief process. It activates the system. And remember, you're bereaved and you have special needs. And how do infants communicate their special needs? By crying, right? They cry. They elicit attention. To spare oneself from grief at all cost can be achieved only at the price of total detachment, which excludes the ability to experience happiness. We would prefer not to feel sad and painful feelings. But if we tend to shut those things down because they are painful, you run the risk of shutting down joy and happiness and gratitude and peace. So that's your choice. So to be able to experience the full realm of what we're capable of experiencing as humans, we need to be okay. We don't have to like it, but we have to be able to come to terms with experiencing all facets of what we're capable of. Because if we shut one side down we don't like, we run the risk of, as Alan Wolfeld says, you're living, but you're really dead inside. So maybe grief, what you're all experiencing, is your response to an unfinished story. I wasn't ready to say goodbye. There's actually a book, that title. I wasn't ready to say goodbye. It didn't finish on your terms. And so you're protesting. John Bramlett, who lost his 2-year-old son when he was struck by a truck just outside of a home, says, "If only I could hold you one more time, if only once more on my lap you could climb. I'd feel the warmth of life now gone and the weight of your tiny body close to mine. I'd look into the depths of your sky blue eyes to your very soul, and in those depths our souls would join. I would hold you like that forever. Content to never move again, I would choose to let the world pass by while we sat there in stillness for all time that is yet to come. The two of us together in the simple contentment of just being, sharing the elusive gift we know as life." Can't you just feel that connection between parent and child? That attachment. And can you also feel and relate to that deep grief that John is describing? And that's because we attach, we give over our hearts. So, what's grief look like? From now on, I do not want anyone in this room to use the word stages. Okay? Promise? Promise? No stages. That was a framework that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross came up with. She just witnessed, she witnessed people dying, and kind of categorized them. It's not evidence-based. Okay? And then it became a model that was adopted in the bereavement world. Well, we have several other models now. And we know, and you probably can agree, that it doesn't progress in nice, orderly stages. It's messy, it's overwhelming, it's disruptive. Sometimes uncontrollable. But we'd like to believe it's in stages because, right? Because there's only got 5 stages. Right? And if I'm at 3.5, then I'm much closer to 5. But there are no stages. Instead, grief will come in bursts, in waves, up and down, inside and outside. Some days you feel, some moments you feel like you've got it, Other times, you pulled under. But that's the process. Okay? And what your job is when the grief wave comes, your job is not to run away from it, or to swim against it, or to deny it. Your job is to feel that grief at that moment. Then it'll subside until the next wave. So it's dynamic, it moves, it changes. You may not recognize it at the beginning of the process. Many times I will say to my clients, I see progress. But when you're in the middle of it, you don't feel it. You don't feel it. Very early in the process, the waves are intense. They pull you under. They're very frequent. And your focus is on the loss. That's what we call acute grieving. When all you can feel and think about is the loss. That's when the pain is very sharp and very painful. Believe it or not, it will increase in intensity before it subsides. So, it doesn't follow a nice linear pattern. It will go up and down. There are times when it will feel worse before it feels better. And time actually has nothing to do with it. So think of yourself having a physical wound. If you didn't attend to that wound, time isn't going to make a difference. Probably get infected, probably feel worse, probably get more complicated, the wound. Now you can't make the wound heal any faster, but you can create conditions where it heals well. You have to be patient. So this is what we're talking about when we're talking about processing grief. We're going to talk about how you do that. You can create the conditions where the natural healing process takes place. Don't get in the way of it. Don't go against the waves. What happens when you're at the beach and you go against a wave? You push back, aren't you? You push back where you're supposed to be. And don't be surprised, because grief goes like this, and it does give you a reprieve, okay? Don't be surprised that there are moments where you can actually be okay. You might find slivers of joy or happiness. And that's okay if they're intermingled with your pain and your sadness. That's okay too. It doesn't mean you're being disloyal. It means you're being human. Now, most of us think that grief only affects us emotionally. But grief is stress. And it affects us on these 5 areas. So what happens to us when we're separated and from a loved one? This person who made our world feel safe, gave our life meaning. Well, with the exception of disbelief, numbness, and you can also experience that even when you knew that the person was dying. Even if you sat by their bedside and held their hand, you will still experience a sense of not knowing. Knowing but not knowing, right? I can't believe it happened. So with the exception of that, your grief can take on any number of these responses. By a show of hands, anybody experienced any of these? And if you don't put up your hand, then you're not grieving. Okay? So I didn't say you have to experience anger. You can experience any one of those. And guess what? This is all good grief. I'm not concerned with any of this. Now, if you were experiencing any or all of it years and years later, I would have a concern. So it's good grief or normal grief responses. Guess what? They're normal. It doesn't feel, right? It doesn't feel normal. But then you don't feel yourself when you've got a broken leg. Or you've just had surgery. You don't feel like yourself. But if you do the grief work, if you don't go against the waves and you process it, these will soften. This is not going to follow you the rest of your life. But if you see yourself up on the screen here, know that it's okay. And that's because your love is anchored in attachment. Sheryl Sandberg says, grief is a demanding companion. In those early days and weeks and months, it was always there. That's acute grief. Not just below the surface, but on the surface, simmering, lingering, festering. Then, like a wave, it would rise up and pulse through me as if it was going to tear my heart right out of my body. In those early moments, I felt like I couldn't bear the pain for one more minute, much less one more hour. That comes from her book called Option B. Sheryl Sandberg, when she wrote the book, when her husband Dave died, she was the COO of Facebook. Happens to all of us. Sometimes I dial his number and then I remember I can't believe he's gone. Do you think you hear them in the house sometimes? Do you go to pick up the phone like this person? Do you think you hear them pulling up in the driveway? Do you think you see somebody in a crowd that looks like your loved one? Yeah. Grief is a journey between the head and the heart. The head knows, the heart doesn't know. And the heart is a really reluctant learner. It wants what it had. And so we have to be very patient when we do our grief work so our heart catches up to our head. So we alternate, right, when we're grieving, between knowing and not knowing. So you're not losing your mind. It's just your heart hasn't caught up to your head yet. Any questions? Any comments? Anything you want me to review? No? Okay. So grief work is this. It's mourning. Grieving is not the same as mourning. Grief is what happened to you. That was that slide that had the two lists of normal grief responses. That just happens because you loved, you attached, you're separated because of death. That happens to you. But mourning is what you do to get through this process. That's grief gone public. It's when I express my grief outside of myself. I don't keep it in here. Because if you distract yourself, if you repress it, then it stays in here. And when it stays in here, 5 years down the road, time isn't going to heal, it's still in here. So mourning is your grief turned into action. But it's very difficult to do it in North America, in Western society, right? We want to move you away from it. We're what we call mourning avoiding culture. It's dreaded experiences. We want to avoid, we want to distract. Or, sometimes I get this from my client. I'm good at solving problems. Why can't I solve this? I've always been able to figure out the answer. Why am I struggling with this? Because you know what? It's not a problem. It's a temporary human condition, a response. It's not a problem. You can't grieve intellectually. You need your brain, you need your mind, but you grieve from here. You mourn from here. So then what we do, because it's dreaded and we don't like to feel pain, and to be honest, I mean, we're all products of this society, so we've integrated and internalized a lot of those messages. We engage in mourning avoiding behaviors. So anything that we avoid, to numb, to distract, so as not to feel. Okay, you can ask again. Anybody brave enough to put up their hands? Thank you. Thank you. Question. Oh, see, I fell for it. I thought you. Who would like to ask a question?
Mine was when you brought up how you're contacting people, or like how I still text my son like probably twice a week. Like, is that normal? Like I always text him with good things that have happened in the past week. Like, is that normal, or is that just cuckoo?
What do you think? What do you think? What's your name?
My name?
Yes.
Debbie.
Debbie. So for those of you who are watching us live stream, Debbie wanted to know whether or not it was normal that you text your son. So I'm presuming your son
Yeah.
has died. How long ago was that?
A year and a half.
Okay.
So this is my second time here for the grieving for the holidays.
Okay. So is this your second Christmas?
Yeah.
When did he die?
July 7, 21.
Okay. So you were probably still in a state of shock, I would presume, and you just probably sleepwalked through Christmas.
Well, see, he worked with me every day.
Okay.
We were self-employed.
Okay.
I still am. But we worked together every day. And he died suddenly of a heart attack, 38. So I text him all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, this is what happened. Oh, we're back at so-and-so's house working. Or, talking about it.
Do you get any, what do you get from that, from doing that?
I just
What's
feel
your
that-
response after that?
What I feel is that I'm communicating to him, and he's going to know what's happening
Okay.
in our work.
Okay.
Our work.
But you're still going on with life.
Pardon?
You're still going on with life.
Oh, yeah.
You talk about him,
Oh, yeah.
you'll cry.
And I
Okay.
still work, his common law still works as
Okay.
well. So,
You know what, I don't think, without knowing more,
yeah.
I don't think that that's unusual.
Okay.
It would be like if you got in your car and said, hey, you know what we did today? We did this and this. And I guess maybe texting is a sign of our times, right?
Yeah, because I can see it every time I text him.
And then you see it, right?
And
I mean, you could do it through journaling, right? You could do it through journaling. So that's,
is that a right thing to do? Like I feel good doing that?
I don't think there's, just based on what you've told me,
Uh-huh.
I don't think there's anything, I'm not alarmed by it,
Right.
okay? I would need to know
It makes me
more.
happy.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Did you want to share, or were you just putting up your hand to say, I see myself on the screen?
Right there.
Okay, did you want to tell us what, maybe?
No, it's surely.
I respect that, that's fair. Anybody else?
Trying to keep myself busy.
Yeah, well, that's because we tell you to do that, right? Don't worry about it, keep yourself busy, you'll feel better, right? And what I'll hear a lot is, I keep myself busy, but I can't fall asleep at night. I don't know why. I'm exhausted, but I can't fall asleep. Because you know what? You didn't allow the grief to come to the surface, and you're taking your grief with you. So it's not going to allow you to relax and to fall into that state. Grief is a demanding companion. It's very demanding. But that's what we tell you. Keep busy. You'll feel better. Because what happens is we've got this wonderful part of our brain that's tricking us into believing if I'm not sad, and if I don't hurt, I must be doing okay. And those of you who are my clients, you know I use this analogy. What happens to an unpaid bill months and months and months? What
Shut
happens?
you off.
Pardon me?
They shut you off.
That's right. The cost is much higher. Right? The cost is much higher when we don't pay the bill. So it behooves you when the wave starts to swell, if you're able to, take a moment and pay attention to it. Feel it and grieve it out. Warn it. Take your breath. Pick up life again. So that's why it comes in waves. It allows us to keep functioning to the best of our ability while still paying attention to the grief. Anything done in excess is a mourning avoiding behavior. Now these are all ways to cope, but not healthy in the long run. It won't sustain you.
In the bottom one, the urgent need to dispose, I can't get rid of his stuff. I've got everything that's had, I just don't know if that's normal or not, or just me, but I cannot get rid of his stuff.
Yeah, so what I would need to know, and not necessarily right now, is, how long has it been? What are the circumstances? So this is what I would do when I work with people. Who died? How did they die? What was the nature of your relationship? Tell me who's in your support system. Tell me what your outlook on life is. Tell me if culture has anything to do with how you're grieving and mourning. I need to know all those things, right? So then I can make an assessment as to whether or not it's a problem or normal. But it's always better to hold on. I'm not talking years, but it's always better to hold on than to give away things urgently. Because when you give things away on pain, guess what? You can't get them back. You can't get them back. But at some point in your grief journey, speaking about belongings, do you need all those things? Because otherwise it would have been yours. Right? True? Right? Do you need to keep your partner's clothing if they're of the opposite sex? Maybe some items. Do you need to keep all of them? And so as you process, you determine what you're going to keep, what are going to be linking objects, watches, earrings, right? What are going to be linking objects? So we don't need everything, but that's only if you've done your grief work. It'll feel okay when you're ready to dispose or release. I say release the belongings. Okay? So what we need to do is we need to honor this experience of grief. I've written an article that says leaning into grief. Again, counterintuitive. I wouldn't want to feel pain, but thank you very much. But if you lean into it, it becomes a natural process. You're not fighting it. And when we do authentic mourning, the grief changes in shape, in dimension. We grow to be able to carry it with us. At the very beginning of the process, when we're acutely grieving, it's this large hole that we keep falling into, right? We don't mean to, but we keep falling into it. And as we process it, that vacancy's still there, but we learn to go around it. I tried to hold it in, but I cried my eyes out. So I tried to hold it in, morning avoiding behavior, right? But I cried my eyes out, natural response, warning. Now, I'm not going to make anybody a crier if the body doesn't naturally need to heal and find balance and regulate themselves that way. You don't have to cry in order to do a good job, but you need to get it out somehow. Any questions? We're going to take a break. Is that okay? We're ready to take a break, a stretch break. Any questions before we break? No? Okay, let's just take a stretch break and then we'll reconvene. We'll zero in on the holidays. I wonder if we can gather back Hello? Good to hear the chatter. Having events like this reminds us that we're not alone in this journey. You know, again, the mind plays tricks with us. We feel like we're the only one. And then we meet other people that are hurting too. We find that we give support, we get support. That's a good thing. Any questions? Any questions about the difference between grieving and mourning? The waves of grief. The 5 stages.
No stages.
No stages. No stages. Yeah. I wish it was that simple, right? No? No questions? Okay. Clear as mud. Okay. So we're going to talk now, we're going to zero in on the holiday season. So they're going to come, whether we like it or not, it's going to come. So we want that hallmark experience, don't we? We want that hallmark experience even before the death of a loved one, right? It's stressful, and we bring this on ourselves. We really bring it on ourselves. What are other people going to think if I don't do this? Or if I change something up? Our society isn't tolerant of emotional pain. Right? You don't want to be, I hope there's no Debbies in this room, but there probably are. Debbie Downer, right? I don't want to bring other people down. What is that? Is that?
Like,
Okay, would you mind turning that off? Okay, great.
I had it turned off.
Okay. So we want and we expect a hallmark experience. And when you're entering into the holidays, grieving, it's not going to be like that. But it doesn't have to also be all bad. But when we're unable to stop the pain to put on the show for everyone else, we feel like there's something wrong with us. We don't want to be that downer. And if you feel that way with people, or if they're giving you that message, then maybe you shouldn't spend time with them. All right? Have you heard of the rule of thirds? Some of you have, right? Dr. Alan Wolffeld's rule of thirds. People that you know can be divided loosely into one of 3 groups. Those that will walk with you through the process, they'll companion you, they'll walk with you, they'll hold your hand, they'll run errands, they'll distract you when they think it's appropriate, they'll cry with you. 1/3 of the people will push and pull you. They'll be the ones that will say, what's wrong with you? It happened in March or April. It's December. Are you still grieving? Aren't you over it yet? And 1/3 of the people will be neutral. Be like it didn't even happen. So loosely try to figure out the people in your life, what group they belong to. And protect yourself, please, from groups 2 and 3. And sometimes it could be people that you're related to, right? Which is a little tricky, but we're going to talk about how you do that.
Slap them?
So we have to make sure that we don't submit to society's expectations. This is your journey. Okay? You choose to write the new narrative. Self-care is not selfishness. Okay? Write that down. Self-care is not selfishness. Self-care is not narcissism. So try to be aware of your mourning avoiding behaviors. Try to be very cognizant of it as we move into the holiday season. So you really have three options. Number one, you're going to mask your pain. You're going to live somebody else's narrative, society's narrative. Be happy, be joyous, you've got a lot to be happy about. Right? You've got other children, right? Well, at least you have your children. Well, they lived a long life. You should be grateful. Right? All those messages. Are you going to ignore all of that to please other people? Are you going to skip Christmas and the holidays? That's called avoidance or withdrawal. That can become a habit. Whenever you have difficulty with anything painful, it becomes a habit then. Or are you going to engage in the holiday season according to your narrative, what you can tolerate? And maybe it's only for this year that you don't put on the turkey feast. Maybe it's only for this year that you don't have the pre-Christmas celebration like you've always had. Maybe for this year you just give yourself a bye. Maybe you do what you're physically and emotionally capable of doing. You decide to write your own narrative. So you might notice that I never said that they're not going to be paid. That's a given. Because you love it. So there's going to be pain. But suffering is optional. Suffering comes when we try to deny the pain. When we go against the waves. That's when we suffer. I think this is pretty self-explanatory, don't you? It's messy, right? Overwhelming.
Absolutely.
Okay? Disruptive. And it's going to seem more intense during the holiday season. Be okay with that. But you can also alter your expectations of the season. So, we're going to acknowledge that there will be pain, but you're also going to remember this is a very normal experience. It's coming out of your love. There will be moments during the season where it might even be okay, even if they're little slivers of time or moments. Anticipation is always the worst. What's it going to be like? Am I going to be able to do it? What if I start crying? What if I break down? And usually, the actual day, whether it's Christmas or a birthday or an anniversary, is really not as bad as we anticipate. That whatever we've created in our minds. Because really, you have already survived the worst. You've survived the worst. Please don't cancel. Because I will guarantee you the next holiday season will be your first. And you go through this all over again. Grief comes and goes. Grief comes and goes, and I by no means have it figured out. It's a no-show when I'm expecting it, but it shows up in places and on days I never saw it coming. Sometimes it's brief, and other times it lingers for longer than I would like. But one thing I know is that there is no way to avoid it or pretend it isn't there. It's not the grief I want to avoid, it's the pain that causes it. Trying to avoid the sadness and loneliness only prolongs the grieving process. So I lean into it and get through it. And it won't last forever. It doesn't if you pay attention to it now. We get much better at coping with it. Viktor Frankl, who survived concentration camp, says that when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are then challenged to change ourselves. So here are some ways you can cope. Set the intention that you're going to get through it. It's going to hurt, but you're capable. And guess what? It's going to be imperfect, and that's okay. It's okay. You're going to experience a variety of feelings. You might even have some good moments, and that's okay too. That's healthy. Don't think worst case scenario, okay? It isn't going to be all horrible. It isn't going to be all bad. Understand what your limits are. Again, if you had a broken leg, you'd understand what your limits are. Just because you can't see your broken heart doesn't mean we can ignore it. Let go of perfectionism. Practice, this is good enough. This is good enough for now. That might not be a bad strategy in our life anyway. Be flexible with your plans, okay? Again, that goes hand in hand with perfectionism. Having certain expectations. And people who tend to be like that have very kind of constricted thinking. Talk about what you want to do. Talk with family members, talk to friends. I prefer to do this. I'd rather not do that. Once had a client who, she lost her son and her husband in a motor vehicle accident. They were on a bus to go to a hockey tournament. And she had a surviving child, a daughter. And unfortunately, after the holiday, she told me this story. She said that she wanted to buy an advent calendar because she always bought the advent calendar for her son. Her daughter was a few years older. But she didn't buy it because she thought it would make her daughter sad. Only to find out that the daughter also wanted to carry on that tradition. And she didn't mention it to her mom because she didn't want to make her mom sad. So while, it came from a very good place of wanting to protect someone you love, if they'd only talked about it, they would have felt that they were on the same page. And that would have been honoring the brother and the son. And even if one didn't want the advent calendar, the other one would still buy it and keep it in another room. So there's ways of working around it because you're all going to grieve slightly differently. You're going to have different expectations. Even though in a family system, you might be grieving the same person, you're going to approach it slightly differently and be understanding of that as well. What about reimagining your traditions? Okay? Change it up a bit. Or say, for this year, this is what we're going to do. You don't have to do it all. If someone wants to bring over the turkey, let them. Let them. Be okay with that. Be humble enough to accept help, to ask for help. Try not to be alone. You will need periods of solitude, okay, because we know it's a very hectic time. And remember your tolerance levels, if they're going to be lowered. You will need periods of kind of reflection, recoiling, that's okay. But do not be alone. And let go of those destructive myths of grief, okay? That you've got to put on a happy face. That's exhausting. Say I'm sad. Say I miss him or her. Think ahead what you're going to say when people wish you. You're going to lash out at them when they say Merry Christmas? Even if they know you're grieving, you're acutely grieving. So think ahead. What would you like to say in response? What's within your control? You don't have to accept every invitation. And if you decide you want to attend events, do it. But it doesn't mean you have to stay the whole evening. Maybe you go and you stay a while. And then when you've hit the wall, you've hit your ceiling, you're exhausted, you say goodnight. But try not to decline every invitation. Try to make an effort. But remember, you're 1/3. You're good 1/3. Okay? I wouldn't necessarily accept an invitation to anybody's invitation who isn't tolerant and understanding and supportive of your grief right now. The holidays are supposed to be a spiritual time, aren't they? Maybe you need to attend to your spirit. Who's going to carry out your loved one's tasks? Plan ahead. What about that empty chair at the table? And have a plan B. Again, that goes with flexible thinking. Okay? Nowadays, we don't really have to go to the mall to shop, right? We can do it on the internet, but if you do shop in person, shop on days where your grief is easier to manage. Or maybe change it up, give gift cards. Include children in the planning. They're often referred to as forgotten grievers. They do have the capacity to attach. So don't minimize their grief and their needs. Release your fear by doing some deep breathing, okay? There's so much research on the importance of deep breathing to ground us, to help us to think more clearly. Because when we're emotionally dysregulated, it takes our thinking brain offline. That's why we tell you not to make any impulsive decisions, because it's usually driven by emotions and not logic. What's important this year? What's the meaning to you of this holiday season? Remember, I talked about gratitude. You might have to work a little hard at practicing gratitude, but we can all, every one of us in this room, can find something to be grateful for, even though we're grieving in mourning. And actually, if you can't, then you might need to look at professional help, if you can't. And it's okay to laugh and to feel good. I mean, I heard a lot of chatter here, right? I didn't hear a lot of tears. I heard a lot of chatter during break. That's okay. That's good. That's normal. It's part of the experience. Did I mention simplify? All right, keep it simple. Keep it simple. Pare down. Viktor Frankl also says, in some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds meaning. Now, I'm not suggesting that you be at the end of your Q process where you get it and you understand it. But just in this holiday season, if you could focus on how do I find meaning? How do I practice gratitude and find meaning? So here are some ways to honor your loved one during this holiday season. It comes from stories I've heard, accumulation of clients I've worked with, research I've done, and also some of my own family's tradition. You need to acknowledge that someone important is not there. So you might want to start the evening or the meal with a prayer or light a candle. Maybe you want to share a favorite story, a funny one. And maybe you'll have sappy tears, right? Sad and happy. Sappy tears. Maybe you want to do a holiday album or something online. Figure out what traditions you'd like to keep. And then reimagine other traditions. You might want to, if you have a tree, you might want to hang a special ornament in memory. Light a candle, display a favorite photo. I like this one. Hang their stockings and fill it with love letters. The reason that I'm doing bereavement work is because 26 years ago I lost my first child. She was born still. She was stillborn. And she was due in November. So she was going to be our Christmas baby. I remember making a wreath for her grave. And it just seemed so surreal. So I wanted to do it because that was the way I was honoring my baby. That was the way of parenting her. And yet it seemed so surreal. So I would do it in waves. I do a little bit, then I back off, and then I go back and do it. And so what we did that Christmas season is we decided to buy a gift for an infant, a little girl. We went and donated it in her memory. And we've been doing that ever since. That's become the family tradition. We still do it. There's lots of people in need. It certainly didn't feel right those first few years. It certainly feels okay now. And then when my subsequent child was born, who happens to be a girl as well, I take her out, we go shopping, and we shop for Hannah's gift. Until she figured out that maybe Hannah would like the things she liked. So she's involved in it. And we still do that to this day. And what my parents did that first Christmas is they still hung a stocking for Big Hannah. So she was part of it, of that Christmas, because she was meant to be there. Well, we expected her to be there. Maybe you want to reach out to someone you haven't been in contact with, and you regret. Another thing that happened also that first Christmas, a very dear friend of ours asked if it was okay if she could buy a great blanket for Hannah's grave. Because I hated the thought of her being cold during the winter. And so she asked my permission if it would be okay to lay a great blanket on her grave. I was touched by that. Maybe you want to donate some time. Step step outside of your comfort zone. See that other people are also hurting. Is there anything you can continue in memory that meant something to your loved one? Maybe you want to adopt a family, support a family through this. Include your loved one's favorite dish. I learned how to make green beans. I know it sounds really simple, but green beans almondine, that was my mom's dish that she'd made. It was from her grandmother. And so that first year after she died, at Christmas, we made that in honor of her. Maybe start a tradition, okay? Something that you discuss with your family. What would we like to do in memory of? Again, going back to what the spirit of the holidays means. If faith is part of your life, embrace it. Be okay with small joys. Okay? Be open to it, please. What about listing all the things that your loved one brought into your life? Make sure you set the intention. Make the decision to create a space for hope, for the possibility, for peace, for relief, for gratitude, and yes, even for a bit of joy. Make sure you keep that door open, even the tiniest bit. It does not have to be all or nothing. One feeling can sit beside another feeling. You can create a space for hope. You're in control of that. Tom Zuba wrote the book Permission to Mourn. This was after he lost his 18-month-old daughter. 9 years later, his wife died. And then his 13-year-old son died of brain cancer. So if anyone's looking for a good book, please Walk the Walk. And he says we're capable, even through our pain and our sadness, to create a space, even the tiniest. So, take-home messages. Normal, natural, necessary. You're not abnormal, even though it feels so abnormal. Your experience is unique, so why are you listening to somebody else's narrative about how you should navigate this holiday season? Make up your mind. I'm going to get through this the best way I can. Find your good 1/3 who'll walk with you. You have to feel it. You have to feel it. If you're sad, you're sad. Don't we address other needs? When we're hungry, we eat. When we're tired, we sleep. When we're thirsty, we drink some water. We pay attention to our needs. Why can't we pay attention to our emotional needs as well? The holidays are going to be difficult. You will have pain. So adjust your expectations accordingly. And keep your plans simple this year. And don't forget your gratitude. And I hope one day you come to understand and truly believe and live the fact that you're grateful that you have it in your life. So I will end with this tonight. Grieving is a journey that teaches us how to love in a new way now that our loved one is no longer with us. Consciously remembering those who have died is the key that opens the hearts, that allows us to love them in new ways. I wish you all a peaceful holiday season. I believe that you can get through it. Thank you once again for coming out and joining me this evening. I wish you all the best the rest of your journey. Any questions? Anything, comments?
I just want to say thank you so much, Michelle.
You're welcome. You're most welcome.
I did there a couple times. You're
It's- I-
very, how do you say that? Like, you could say everything that makes everybody feel good. I hope, right? We can get our hearts into moving on. So I just want to thank you.
Thank you very much. I've walked the journey. I've done the work,
Yeah, you have.
right?
Yes, you have.
And I know that it can be done.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, and thank you for being courageous enough to come out here as well. Any other question here?
I just wanted to know the author of the book, Permission to Mourn.
Oh, Tom Zuba, ZUBA. Anything else? Any questions from cyberspace? No, we're good? Okay, so please drive carefully. I wish I had